when two officers arrested her. When two officers arrested her, they had no idea they'd face her again, this time in court as the judge deciding their fate. It was a sunny afternoon in Fort Collins, Colorado. The park bustled with children playing, joggers on trails, and families picnicking under oak trees. Amid this peaceful scene, Camille Johnson sat on a bench near the pond, a thick hardcover book in her lap. As a respected attorney, she rarely found moments to escape her demanding schedule. Her concentration broke at the screech of tires. A police cruiser pulled up, drawing onlookers' attention. Two officers stepped out with stern expressions, their eyes immediately locking onto Camille, the only person sitting alone. "Ma'am, may we speak with you for a moment?" one called out, his voice carrying suspicion rather than concern. Camille glanced up, her demeanor calm. "Of course," she replied, closing her book carefully. The second officer stepped closer. "We got a call about suspicious activity in the area. Mind telling us what you're doing here?" "Suspicious activity?" Camille raised an eyebrow. "I'm just sitting here reading." She held up her book, but their scrutiny didn't waver. "Can we see some ID?" the first officer demanded. "I don't understand. What's the reason for this?" "It's routine," the second officer replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. A small crowd began to gather, some curious, others uncomfortable with the interaction's obvious imbalance. Camille sighed and reached into her bag, producing her wallet. As she handed over her license, the officer scanned it with unnecessary intensity. "Camille Johnson," he read aloud mockingly. "What's your business here, Miss Johnson?" "I live in this city," she answered, inhaling deeply to maintain her patience. "I came to enjoy the park. Is that a problem?" "We'll see." He returned her ID but didn't leave. Instead, the questions continued, feeling less like routine and more like an interrogation. "Do you always carry a book like that around?" one sneered. "Are you alone or waiting for someone?" the other added, his hand resting deliberately on his belt. Camille had handled countless tense courtroom situations, but this was different. The power dynamic was stark, the tone carrying an edge she recognized all too well. She chose her words carefully. "I'm not answering any more questions unless you tell me what I'm being accused of," she said firmly. Her refusal triggered something in them. The first officer stepped forward. "Don't get smart with us. We're just doing our job." "And I know the law," Camille replied steadily. "I'm not breaking it by sitting in a public park." But reason wasn't on their agenda. The first officer grabbed her arm. "You're resisting," he said, though Camille hadn't moved. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, startled. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Someone pulled out a phone to record. "Stop resisting," the officer repeated loudly, performing for his growing audience. Camille's heart raced as cold metal handcuffs snapped around her wrists. She tried staying calm despite the humiliation and frustration burning in her chest. As the officers led her to their cruiser, they ignored onlookers' questions. Camille turned toward the crowd, locking eyes with a young woman holding up her phone. There was an unspoken exchange, a silent plea to document the unfolding injustice. As the car door slammed shut, Camille knew this wasn't the end but only the beginning. Inside the cruiser, her mind raced. She'd spent years defending clients and navigating the legal system, but now she was on the other side. The absurdity struck her with no humor, only anger. The ride to the station was suffocatingly silent except for the police radio's crackle. Her wrists ached from the tight handcuffs. At the station, things worsened. The booking process, invasive and humiliating, stripped away her dignity. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and led to a small holding cell with buzzing fluorescent lights. "Enjoy your stay," an officer said smugly, shutting the cell door. Sitting on the cold bench, hands clasped in her lap, Camille replayed the park events repeatedly. How had such a peaceful moment spiraled into this? The answer was clear: prejudice. Hours passed before a young officer approached with a clipboard. "Miss Johnson, you've been charged with resisting arrest and obstructing a peace officer," he stated flatly. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice sharper than intended. "You can discuss that in court," he replied before walking away. She exhaled slowly, thinking strategically. The charges were flimsy, she knew it, but the fight ahead wouldn't be easy. Cases like hers rarely were. Eventually released on bail, Camille stepped into the cool night air, finding her colleague and friend Marissa waiting by the curb. "Camille!" Marissa rushed over, her face showing relief and concern. "Are you okay?" Camille nodded, though a slight tremor betrayed her. "I'm fine," she said, the words feeling hollow. As they drove away, Marissa kept glancing at her. Finally, Camille broke the silence. "I'm not letting this slide, Marissa. Not this time." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I'm tired of this happening," Camille replied. "I have the tools, knowledge, and resources to fight back, and I will." That night, Camille sat at her kitchen table surrounded by legal pads and books, working tirelessly on a civil rights lawsuit against the officers and department. Her hands shook not from fear, but from determination. As days turned to weeks, the community rallied around her. The video of her arrest had gone viral, prompting people from all walks of life to share messages of support and their own stories of injustice. Camille's resolve strengthened with every email, call, and comment. She wasn't just fighting for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced, humiliated, or dismissed. Yet even as she prepared for court, she couldn't predict how justice would take an unexpected turn. The weeks following her arrest were a whirlwind of emotions and relentless work. Her law firm initially hesitated, worried her public case might overshadow their carefully cultivated reputation. But Camille didn't flinch, explaining calmly but firmly that this fight was about setting a precedent. The viral video had sparked conversations across the city and beyond. The footage of Camille, calm yet defiant as officers led her away, became a symbol of resilience against injustice. Reporters called for interviews, but Camille declined them all. She wasn't interested in media attention. Her focus remained laser-sharp, building a case that would hold the officers accountable and expose the systemic flaws allowing such behavior. At night, when the world quieted, the situation's weight crept in. She replayed the arrest, the dismissive tone, the handcuffs, the crowd's murmurs. She considered how easily things could have escalated further, a thought that churned her stomach but fueled her determination. One evening, as she researched, Marissa arrived with takeout. Camille barely looked up as her friend placed food on the table. "You've been at this for hours," Marissa said gently. "I don't have a choice," Camille replied without pausing. Marissa sat across from her. "You know this is bigger than just a legal battle, right? People are looking to you now." Camille closed her laptop, meeting her friend's gaze. "I know," she said steadily. "That's why I can't afford to lose." Her preparation was meticulous. She combed through similar cases, gathered precedents and evidence to dismantle the officer's claims, and enlisted trusted colleagues who shared her passion for justice. But it wasn't just about the courtroom. Camille engaged with the community, attending town halls, listening to others with similar experiences, and speaking at a local college about accountability. One afternoon after a meeting, a stranger approached her. "Miss Johnson?" the woman asked hesitantly. "Yes." "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said, voice cracking, "for standing up to them, for standing up for all of us." Camille felt her throat tighten. She managed a small smile. "I'm just doing what I can." The community's support was double-edged, empowering but also pressuring. She couldn't let them down. Then one day, Her attorney called with news. The officers had filed a motion to dismiss her case, a standard delay tactic, but as her attorney explained the next steps, she froze. "Camille," he said cautiously, "you should know something else. You've been assigned as the judge for one of their cases next month." The irony staggered her. Camille leaned back, processing the revelation. After weeks preparing to fight these officers in court, fate had handed her an entirely different kind of justice. She wondered momentarily if she could sit on that bench and remain impartial. But then she thought about everything they'd put her through, and the people depending on her to make a stand. This wasn't just coincidence. It was an opportunity to show what real justice looked like. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as people found their seats. The case seemed unremarkable, an internal misconduct hearing for two officers accused of excessive force in an unrelated incident. To most, it was just another day in the justice system. Officers Carter and Daniel sat at the defendant's table wearing their uniforms like armor, leaning toward each other and speaking in low tones. Their expressions were indifferent, almost bored. To them, this was routine, another hurdle to clear, another case to dismiss. Then the judge's chamber door opened, and the room fell silent. Camille stepped onto the bench, her black robe flowing behind her. She moved purposefully, her expression calm yet commanding. Taking her seat, she glanced toward the defendants. The reaction was immediate. Officer Carter's face drained of color, his eyes widening in shock. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, jaw tightening as he struggled to process what he was seeing. It was her, the woman they had humiliated and arrested at the park. Camille allowed a brief pause, letting the moment's weight settle over the room. Then, in a clear, steady voice, she began the proceedings. "This court is now in session. Please be seated." The officers sat stiffly, their composure faltering. Carter whispered something to their lawyer, who nodded but kept focus on Camille. For the first time in weeks, Camille felt the upper hand, yet she knew this wasn't about revenge. Her judicial role demanded impartiality, and she would uphold that standard. Still, the irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. As attorneys presented opening arguments, Camille maintained professionalism, listening intently and taking notes. Occasionally, her gaze flickered toward the officers. She noted the tension in their shoulders and their fidgeting hands. During recess, Carter and Daniel stepped into the hallway, voices low but agitated. "How is she the judge?" Carter hissed, barely containing his frustration. "This has to be a setup," Daniels muttered, shaking his head. "It's not a setup," their lawyer interjected. "It's coincidence, and you need to stay focused. She's not the enemy here. Your actions are—" But the officers weren't listening, too consumed by their surreal predicament. When court resumed, Camille remained composed, ensuring the hearing proceeded fairly. Yet her presence alone unsettled the defendants. Every time she addressed them, they shifted in their seats, their confidence eroding. During witness testimony, Camille caught Carter stealing a glance at her. His expression wasn't defiance but something closer to regret, as if beginning to understand the gravity of their actions. By day's end, tension filled the courtroom. Camille adjourned the hearing with a decisive gavel strike. "We will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m., she announced. As the room emptied, Camille lingered at her bench organizing notes. She felt the officers' stares as they hesitated by the door, clearly debating whether to approach. They ultimately left quietly, their steps heavy with the realization that this was far from over. For Camille, the real challenge wasn't in the moment's irony, but in the decisions that would follow, and whether justice could truly prevail. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. News of the unexpected twist had spread, drawing a larger crowd than usual. Some came from curiosity, others to support Camille, Though they knew her judicial role prevented showing favoritism, the prosecutor methodically presented evidence against the officers, including testimony from the victim of their excessive force. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, the officers' actions weren't just a lapse in judgment. They were a blatant abuse of power. Their behavior reflects a pattern of disregard for those they're sworn to protect. Camille nodded, taking in every word. Her focus remained unshakable even as the defendants shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. The defense attorney countered, his tone measured but strained. Your Honor, while we acknowledge the incident, we argue the situation escalated beyond the officers' control. Their intent wasn't malicious, and this case lacks sufficient grounds for punitive measures. As arguments continued, Camille couldn't ignore the parallels to her own experience, the excuses, the justifications. Yet she pushed personal feelings aside, determined to let facts guide her. The prosecutor called the victim to the stand, a young man named Ethan, whose voice trembled as he recounted being tackled during a routine traffic stop. They didn't give me a chance to explain, Ethan said, eyes darting nervously between the attorneys and officers. It felt like they decided I was guilty before I even spoke. Did you resist their orders? The prosecutor asked. No, Ethan replied firmly. I was scared, but did everything they said. It didn't matter. They'd already made up their minds. The defense attorney tried poking holes in his testimony, but Ethan held his ground. Camille watched intently, her expression unreadable. Then came the moment everyone awaited. The defendants were called to testify, Officer Carter first. He glanced nervously at Camille as he swore the oath, his voice shaky as he answered questions. Officer Carter, the prosecutor began, you've been accused of using excessive force. Can you explain your actions that night? Carter hesitated, gaze darting toward Daniels. I thought the situation was escalating. I made a judgment call. And do you believe your actions were justified? At the time, yes. But looking back, I could have handled it differently. Differently how? By not tackling an unarmed, compliant individual to the ground? Carter opened his mouth but said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. When Daniels testified, his demeanor was similarly strained. His attempts to justify their actions only strengthened the prosecutor's case, highlighting their inability to take accountability. Camille listened closely, her face revealing nothing. Inside, she felt a mixture of frustration and pity. These men had been given authority yet wielded it recklessly, leaving harm in their wake. As the day progressed, the evidence against the officers became overwhelming. The prosecutor's closing argument powerfully urged the court to set a precedent that abuse of power wouldn't be tolerated. The defense's closing statement grasped at straws, lacking conviction. Even the officers seemed resigned to the likely outcome. Camille adjourned the hearing, announcing a ruling would come the following week. As the courtroom emptied, Carter and Daniels lingered near the exit, faces pale. For the first time, they seemed to grasp the gravity of their actions and what awaited them. But justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about accountability, change, and ensuring past mistakes wouldn't be repeated. A week later, silence fell over the packed courtroom as Camille entered to deliver her ruling. Reporters lined the back wall, pens poised. This was no longer just about two officers. It had become a symbol of a larger fight for justice and accountability. The role of law enforcement is to protect and serve with integrity, respect, and fairness, Camille began, her voice calm but firm. When those entrusted with this responsibility abuse their power, it erodes public trust and causes harm far beyond the immediate victim. This case has laid bare the consequences of such actions. She paused, scanning the room. Carter and Daniels sat with bowed heads, feeling the weight of her words. The evidence demonstrates that Officers Carter and Daniels acted with unnecessary force, disregarding sworn protocols. Their actions were not only unjustified, but indicative of a troubling pattern that must be addressed. Camille outlined the consequences: mandatory suspension without pay, extensive retraining, and a formal disciplinary record. The ruling balanced accountability with opportunity for reform. When she finished, Camille closed the case with a decisive gavel strike. "This court is adjourned." The officers stood, expressions somber. Before exiting, Carter hesitated and turned to Camille. "Your Honor," he said, voice barely audible, "I'm sorry. It wasn't enough to undo the harm, but it was a start." Camille nodded, acknowledging his words without offering absolution. True change, she knew, would come through actions, not apologies. As the courtroom emptied, Camille remained seated, reflecting. She had seen justice served, but the victory felt bittersweet. For every case like this, countless others went unspoken and unresolved. That evening, Camille attended a community meeting at a local recreation center, the room filled with people eager to share their stories, frustrations, and hopes. As she listened, she felt renewed purpose. An older woman approached after the meeting, her voice trembling. "Thank you," she said, gripping Camille's hand. "What you did in that courtroom, it means the world to us." Camille smiled softly. "This is just the beginning. We have so much more work to do." The following weeks saw meaningful conversations between community leaders, law enforcement, and activists. Camille used her platform to advocate for reforms, emphasizing transparency and accountability in policing. The case sparked a ripple effect beyond Fort Collins. People began demanding change, pushing for policies prioritizing fairness and equality. For Camille, the journey wasn't about personal vindication, but ensuring others wouldn't endure what she had. The fight for justice continued, but moments like this reminded her that change, though slow, was possible. As she stood on the courthouse steps one afternoon, watching young activists gather for a peaceful rally, she felt hope. The system wasn't perfect, but with enough voices, it could be pushed toward progress. And that, she thought, is the kind of justice worth fighting for.